Yeah. That's a substance abuse in Narcan. I did not know I was going to be the first person going. I assume that everyone here knows that this is about substance abuse in Narcan. My name is Max Weimer. Okay, for you. Thank you. Okay. So, how's everyone doing?
Good. Great. The end.
This is my fault.
Up here. It's not the event tonight, she's an exhibit. Okay. Yes, it's here. It just needs to be presented and tested.
All right, we're back. So my name is Max Weimer. I'm a sophomore here at DSISD. I wish I could see that. I'm here to talk about Narcan and substance abuse from a student perspective. So last semester we had in our civics class we had a thing called Civic Action Project, where basically we had to do a project about how we want to change our community or make the world a better place. And I chose education and awareness about fentanyl and Narcan and stuff like that. So I chose this topic because our schools, one of the big reasons is because our school is so close to Colfax. So you see a lot of stuff with that. It's not amazing, but I feel like because of that, it's a very important thing for us to talk about here. And then I also do it, or I also chose it because I have a statistic here. One's from somewhere, American something. 1 in 7 young adults will have a substance abuse disorder, which is a lot, and a lot more young adults will come into contact with some sort of drugs or substances during their life. And then personal matters, I've personally had issues, or not personal issues, but I've had people who have had drug abuse problems in my life. So it is a very personal issue to me. All right, so for our project, we had to choose some stakeholders and people who held a factor or a say in the community. So for my factors, or for my stakeholders, I first chose Maria Height. So Maria Height is our mental health support staff and our social worker here at DSISD. I got a ton of good information. what we can do about it here at DSISD. So my original project was to supply students with like Narcan and just general education about this. I learned from her though that liability is a thing here, and you can't really do that. We also learned about resources already available, which I will get into later in the next slides. There is resources where you can actually order Narcan and fentanyl test strips online for free. Our next next stakeholder was the actual students here at DSISD. Actually, students all across DPS, and through our research, we obviously found that there's a major impact on them, as well as the issues that could arise. And then obviously parents, we ran a survey, actually, some of you might have gotten that survey, and through that survey, we found that 53.1% of people who took the survey would want their students to carry Narcan, and 31% of that wish for adults to be supplied with Narcan too, and only 15% wanted no Narcan. Next slide, please. Right, so our findings from the project, first of all, what is fentanyl? Fentanyl is an opioid that is used to replace other opioids and a lot of substances. It is very, very, very potent and very, very, very deadly. So you can see in this image, maybe actually, because it's actually very small. That's a penny, and right next to it, that little white blob is, that's how much fentanyl it takes to kill a person. So it does not take a lot at all. It's used a lot because it's very cheap and because it's so potent, you just use it. And then back onto the resources actually available, if you use that bit.ly link right there, you can actually order fentanyl or not fentanyl, Narcan and fentanyl test strips to your house for free. That is a resource which we offer. And then, of course, there's a bunch of community education events, such as this one right here, that you can go to learn about substance abuse and learn about other things like Narcan and other things that are important. So what is Narcan? Narcan is a medicine which blocks opioid receptors in the body. So it basically just blocks the effects of what that drug will do and cause a reversal of an overdose if you have to have one. It is generally administered through a nasal spray, as you can see right there. But you can also get it in injection form. I believe one other form too, which I'm forgetting, but that one's pretty rare. It is generally considered safe to use with very little negative side effects. It can cause like nausea, tremors, and stuff like that. But it's generally safe to use. See.
You got it. You're doing great.
I'm doing my
The
best.
computer.
This is your fault.
Yeah, the computer's being bad. You're doing great.
So it's generally safe to use at most, so feel some uncomfortable side effects at worst, not really. However, if it is administered by someone who is opioid dependent and is has a lot of opioids in their system, it can cause withdrawal, which through our project, which we learned, it's probably best to only be used by trained professionals or just someone who generally knows what they're doing. So yeah, and then obviously after someone administers Narcan, they should seek immediate medical help. For our project, we found that the best option for us would be to increase staff training, like general first aid training in general, but training around how to use Narcan and how to use anything like that, and allowing them to properly and legally carry Narcan and be So, so as I said, training for DSISD staff or just general DPS staff on how to administer and use Narcan, be properly trained in that. Also, education on available resources, which you saw with the bit.ly link, and then increased awareness and some legislation around general drug abuse problems, but specifically to our Project Narcan and fentanyl. Questions?
When you were doing your research, did you come across any, I guess, myths about Narcan that like maybe the common public may also like, see as a myth and maybe you can help dispel by any chance?
Honestly, not really. From what I could see, it had a general positive reputation from most people. I didn't really see anything besides that. Of course, if someone is opioid dependent, a lot of opioids in the system, that could be bad. But I also didn't like look on social media or anything like that. Most of it was like news and stuff like that.
Do you have any ideas how you could get other youth or your friends or students here involved in education around Narcan and what's going on with that?
Well, of course, this community event we're hosting right now, but we also wanted to do, I don't know if we did, might have, but have flyers around with that bit.ly, with the URL to that bit.ly for the Narcan and fentanyl test strips was something we were planning on doing. But just stuff like that, general like posters around school or posters around other GPS schools and other events like this, probably the best way to go about that.
Fantastic, thank you, Matt.
All right, can I please have my lovely panelists come up to the stage?
Please.
Hello,
Hello.
nice to see you all this evening, at least it's not snowing, since we've had to reschedule this several times. I'm Beth McCann, I'm the elected district attorney for the city and county of Denver. So I'm happy to be here. I'm not happy about how much fentanyl there is in our city. Thank you, Max, for that very interesting presentation. I learned something. I didn't realize that Narcan can be actually harmful in a way if someone has a lot of opioid in their system. Still better than the alternative, yes. But anyway, thank you for that. So I'm going to hand it to the next panelist.
Hello, I'm Kelly. I'm the school nurse here at DSISD and Morley Middle School. I've actually, I think at the beginning of the school year, I had Max come and ask me a bunch of good questions relating to having Narcan here at school, which I'd like to say that we do, which is great. And I have it actually in my clinic, as well as I have it upstairs with DSISD. And I have delegated to the staff, definitely for Narcan, but there is a 7-minute video that I do have the link to that I could always send to parents if you guys are wondering information about Narcan and how to use it and all the implications with that. And we are working on more of a school-wide situation of getting everyone notably able to get Narcan. and just all the details with that. So if you have any questions, let me know. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Mackender, and I work for the Colorado Consortium for Prescription Drug Abuse Prevention, a lot of words. And we're a state agency. We're housed at the Anshin's campus of the School of Pharmacy. And my role is an external relations strategist for the Northeast region of Colorado, which includes Denver. So one of the main things that I do in my job is to really do outreach in communities, come to events like this, learn what's going on in our schools, in our community, provide technical assistance, help find funding, help provide education. And then I think a really important goal that we have is to learn at the community level what we can take back to our state partners at a governmental level to change policies and processes in Colorado. We also do a lot of work with the Attorney General's office. As you know, there's millions and millions of dollars coming into Colorado and across the United States from the opioid settlements. So we will sit on those councils and talk to them about best practices and evidence that we know will work to help abate the opioid crisis. So I'm really excited to be here, and it's so important to start off with a student. My background is in youth prevention, upstream prevention, meaning how can we work on things before they start, with your words you all know. Boring public health words, but one of the main things we can do is really involve youth and people with lived experience in the work that we're doing. So thanks for having me.
Great. And so I have a question for you, Jennifer. And so what can parents do to support their kids, and how can we talk to you about prescription drugs and fentanyl? I know that's kind of a loaded question.
Speaking about this, and I'm going to start off with one thing that somebody did a couple of years back when I was at a fentanyl conference where we were doing education. If you all wouldn't mind getting your phones out, I would greatly appreciate it. And I'd love for you, if you'll do this with me, this is something we can do today to help with prevention and help with our youth, is put the Colorado Crisis Line in our phones. So if you don't have that in your phone right now, it's a resource that you can use, that you can share with your friend and your family and your student. That if they're in a time of crisis could mean anything to you. It could mean, I'm just having a really bad hour, a really bad moment, and I need to have a moment to talk to a counselor or somebody outside of my current circle about what's going on. So Colorado Crisis Line can help you with mental health, helps with behavioral health, with substance use. And so I really encourage people to have this as a resource to provide to other folks in your community. So those of you that were nice enough to get your phone out, if you could put any contact in for Colorado Crisis Line, and then you can add the phone number 1-844-493-8255. And then they also have a texting line. You can text TALK to the number 38255 if you want to put that in your notes. And for the youth, those students that are here, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with your friends, this is a 24/7, every day of the year possibility for you to get some help. So, I mean, to me, that's just something to always start out with as far as what can we do as adults, is we can learn about the resources that we have at our fingertips. Talking about what we can do in the community and as parents, starting with, I want to just go back a little bit before what we're dealing with today with the fentanyl crisis to what we can do, again, this upstream idea, what we can do when kids are young. And even when they're not young, maybe they're in high school, there are two things that are really important. And they're not very fancy, and you've probably heard them before when you're thinking about how you can help a young person's mental health. They're making sure they have a trusted person in their lives. Doesn't have to be you, doesn't have to be a relative. You don't even need to know that person. It might be the nurse, it might be a teacher, it might be the sandwich maker, right? But having a trusted person, having connectivity in their lives, opportunities for youth to connect. These are also things that we need as adults too. And then being able to understand our emotions and what we can do with those. And these are all things that we really need to work on when kids are young, like grade school age, all the way up until the age that I am now. So I always like to start with that. But I know what we're here tonight to talk about really is the fentanyl crisis and the concerns being parents and knowing that fentanyl is kind of in our world and potentially impacting
someone in your family or a student. The main things I would say are really, as a parent, let me get my notes here. And I'm a parent too, so when I say these things, I think of my students. But the main thing is for you to know the facts. So this information that's out here, probably some of the words that Max has been used tonight, we may not have known, right? Maybe it's the first time you heard about Narcan. Maybe he said something that you're like, I didn't know that, or that's not how I interpreted it. So getting the education, knowing the facts, learning the resources, and I know that there are a lot of resources that are out in the hallway. That would be fantastic if you would pick up and read those, share them with your student, and just open up the conversation. There's no right moment, and it's not a speech that you're giving, right? It's a conversation that you're having about something that's happening right now in this world, in their community, potentially at the school, and things. There's probably people in this room that have been impacted. So one thing that we know in public health that does not work is fear factoring, right? So the Just Say No campaigns and all of the dummy crash cars and things they did when I was a kid, sometimes they do more harm than good. And I always feel like there's that in-between balance because you want to share the facts, and those facts are scary. So sometimes you might feel like you're pushing out fear in the world, but you just want to share the importance of what's going on around fentanyl. I think right now the DEA is saying 6 out of every 10 pills that they are looking at that are illicit are laced with fentanyl. So that's 6 out of 10. That feels like fear factoring to me when I said that, but it is something that we just need to share with our students that your young person may not be using drugs, or you may not know if they are, but they may know someone that is, and they may be experiencing something in their lives where they're feeling some pressure or some stress, and someone's telling them about Adderall. If it's not their Adderall, and it didn't come from their medicine cabinet with their name on it, they shouldn't be taking it. You know, that's what's happening right now is the drug market is just full of illicit drugs or illegal drugs out there that are saying that they're being sold as oxycodone or as Adderall or as Xanax, and they can easily be laced with fentanyl. And as Max said, sometimes you may be that one person that gets that one pill that was enough to have you overdose. Again, I don't mean to be fear factory. But if you read the information out there, it's just stuff that you really need to just share as education with your young person. Don't spread myths. And I know that Denver Public Health has a great Mythbusters or myth facts rather than myths out in the hallway. And I would encourage you to take that and read it because there are a lot of myths out there about fentanyl, and some of those prevent us from helping people. Covering the basics, trying not to show any judgment. Doing the warning about the fake prescription pills, and then sharing about signs of overdose. If we kind of come to this as a harm reduction type of intervention where we're saying, what we want to do is keep people alive. You know, we want to meet people where they are. I cannot prevent somebody from using drugs. Drugs are fun. Some people love drugs, right? And I'm not going to say don't use drugs, but what I am going to say is let's do what we can to help reduce the harm. One of those is what Max was talking about, and that's naloxone. And anyone can use naloxone. I've got a box with me here. I know there's some in the hallway. It's 3 easy steps. You basically take the plunger and stick it up the nose, wait a couple minutes. If the person doesn't come to, stick it in the other nostril, stick it up the nose. Call 911 immediately. There's all kinds of laws to protect you. The Good Samaritan law will protect you from the liability of doing this. So don't be scared to use it. Colorado will protect you with the Good Samaritan law. Learning what an overdose looks like. We don't have to be doctors, but there are some signs that, that you should be aware of to know what an overdose looks like. Again, saying that you're close to Colfax, living in a metro area, you may come across somebody, and now that if you have more education, you'll learn, and you also have your naloxone in your bag, and what you can do with that. So I just appreciate your time. I could probably spend the whole hour talking about all kinds of stuff, but I did bring some resource pages too, because there are some really good social media campaigns out there specific to adults that show, and for you to share with your young person too, that show the difference, photographs of what a fake pill looks like compared to a prescription pill, and how difficult it is for people to see the difference. All kinds of resources about where you can find recovery and treatment. So I would say mostly just going to your resources and being honest and just really caring. I wish I had something more profound to say, but the fact that you guys are here tonight is a huge first step.
Hello, can you hear me? Is it working? Okay, cool. Hi, sorry I'm late. I was on the other side of town doing a similar thing. My name is Marian Rourke. I'm with the City and County of Denver Department of Public Health and Environment. I'm a senior analyst there. I've been with the department for almost 6 years now, focusing predominantly on opioids, but then also on overdose prevention, also a mental health anti-stigma campaign called What You Say Matters, and we just wrapped up our behavioral health needs assessment. So I like to kind of frame everything, and yes, we're talking about opioids and we're talking about fentanyl and overdoses today, but I think all of that is really situated within a larger context of mental health and substance use and the broader behavioral health and support systems that we need to live a better and healthier life. Did you want me to just introduce myself, or I also don't know what's happened yet, so.
Just as our first question, so I was gonna ask your question.
And so Marian, what are we seeing like trends wise in the community related to fentanyl use?
Well, it is sure here, huh? So I think, and again, I'm probably going to repeat things that other folks have said. Okay, cool. So, I think the really important thing to recognize right now is that there are kind of two groups of folks that we're focusing on in terms of messaging, and that messaging may vary in terms of how to prevent overdoses or how to really engage folks in conversation. The reality is, fentanyl is basically the only opioid that you're gonna get in Denver if you don't have a prescription from a doctor. You'd be hard pressed. We do see heroin sometimes there are actual diverted pills, but you'd be very hard pressed to find an opioid that is not fentanyl if you do not have a prescription here. That means that for folks who use opioids, they basically have to use fentanyl or they're going into withdrawal, which is very uncomfortable. So that's one group, right? And then there's the folks who are using drugs, but we'll refer to them as opioid naive. So like don't typically use opioids, so not heroin, not oxys, those types of things. And those folks might be casually trying other drugs, or they might be using like cocaine or other pills on the weekends, and might not understand how opioids work, and that there are things like fentanyl test strips and naloxone that can help to reduce the harm associated with opioid use. So I think one of the challenges that I know Jennifer struggles with this as well, is how do we tailor these messages and make sure that we're reaching the right people? So the message I'm really using with folks at the end of the day is, people are going to use drugs. Let's make sure that they have the right information and resources to make sure that they do that as safely as possible. People use drugs for a lot of different reasons, as you mentioned. Sometimes it's for fun. Sometimes it's because people, need something else in their life. It could be medical, a lot of different reasons, right? I'm not in the business of figuring out exactly what that is, at least for the purpose of this conversation. But we want to make sure that people know where to reach out to for different resources. I remember when I was in high school, everyone was using ecstasy. I was in Chicago. I don't know if that was going on here, but I'm sure it was. And that was really the pill going around, right? I think the really important thing for people to understand right now is that the illicit drug supply varies so much. You and your friends can buy the same pills from the same person in the same day. You're going to get completely different things. And even with fentanyl test strips, you are not going to know exactly what is in it. You might know if it has some fentanyl in it, but that is all that the fentanyl test strips are going to tell you. We also really say for folks, never use alone. And I think that that's really important because there's no one to respond when there's an opioid overdose, right? But also, if you're in a group of people and everyone is using, then there's still no one to respond in the event of an opioid overdose. So I really like to encourage this kind of like designated driver type situation. Someone in your party needs to be able to respond to an overdose. People who don't use opioids typically don't know much about overdose prevention, about rescue breathing. I'm really encouraging folks to have conversations. What is your plan? Okay, so you're going out tonight. Maybe you're going to a party with some friends, things like that. You don't even know who might be there, who might have what. It's great to know how to recognize and respond. As you mentioned, the questions about fentanyl. People are using it. Whether or not they need to is the big question right now, right? But regardless, people should have those resources. We really started seeing fentanyl in Denver upticking at the end of 2019, so even before we really were closed down for COVID. And then it really spiked. We saw large increases in 2020, 2021, and then we are starting to level off a little bit as far as fatal overdoses, but there were 7 fatal overdoses related to drugs in Denver among youth, and specifically in 2022, and that's the highest that I believe we've ever had. So it is really important. We know folks who go and they buy drugs, even if you buy the same thing the same day. Have we touched on the chocolate chip cookie effect? This is my favorite. Can I just, oh, thank you. It's not, I didn't come up with it, but I love it. So, say someone is buying a drug. Think of that drug as a chocolate chip cookie. And the chocolate chips in it is the fentanyl, or whatever the strong active drug is. Have you ever seen 2 identical chocolate chip cookies? Thank you. Unless it's my sister, because she's like very, very specific. But they're not gonna be the same. Sometimes there's gonna be walnuts in them. Sometimes there's gonna be M&Ms. So think of your pill as a chocolate chip cookie. So when we also tell folks to test their drugs with fentanyl test strips, if someone tests just one side of it, they might test the side that doesn't have fentanyl in it. So in order to get it into a way that is most likely to collect or detect the fentanyl, we want folks to crush it up as much as possible. So think about smashing up that chocolate chip cookie in the bottom of a bag and it's all crumbly, and it's more likely that you're gonna get some of those chocolate chips if you were to put liquid in there and test it with a strip. So that is the quick version of it. I guess I'll just, here you go.
Thank you. That was good. Everyone's doing wonderful. Thank you so much. And now for some questions for DA McKinnon. How is Colorado responding to the fentanyl crisis? And what does the DA's office do to address teen drug use and fentanyl use? And are there any restorative practices? And lastly, if you have the power to change one thing, what would it be? Like your DA.
I'll give it a try. So, of course, my role in this is a little bit different in that my office prosecutes people who possess and sell fentanyl and other illegal drugs. So we are, our job is really community safety and public safety. And so we are focused on identifying people, particularly people who are selling fentanyl. So it's interesting in Colorado because a few years ago, the legislature reduced the penalty for possession of any illicit drug under 4 grams to be a misdemeanor as opposed to a felony. So as a result of that, my office started a program for possession, misdemeanor possession cases, which we still have, that is called HIM, Helping, Encouraging, and Motivating. And the idea is for those people who have small amounts of any drug, we are trying to address whatever it is that they need in order to not need drugs. And it's called harm reduction, which was mentioned earlier. The idea is to meet the person where they are, figure out what they need, and assist them in accomplishing those, rather than a punitive approach for possession of small amounts of drugs. Last year, the legislature changed the law with respect to fentanyl so that possession of 1 gram or above of fentanyl is, again, a felony, as is selling or distributing any drug is a felony. And depending on the amount of drug that is present, it can be a different degree of felony with a different possible penalty. So what we do in my office is really try to focus on people who are distributing fentanyl to the broader community. So we really look much more carefully at people who are selling or distributing drugs as where we want to put our major focus. Because we do understand that there are a lot of people who become addicted to drugs who have small amounts, who really need more assistance in addressing the underlying addiction. Drug addiction is tough to break. Any of you who've had family members or friends who become addicted to drugs know that it is a constant battle and that people do relapse. So we understand that in the criminal justice system, that we are going to see people relapse and possess drugs again. So what we try to do is be more aware of that going on and trying to address that underlying addiction. Honestly, I don't think we're that successful in the criminal justice system because the system is not really designed for treatment. It is more designed for punishment and has been traditionally the case with criminal justice. So we are trying to be a little more enlightened, I think, in terms of addressing addiction. And there are many programs now in Denver that do address addiction. That said, I am very concerned about the proliferation of fentanyl and just the numbers of people that we are seeing in the criminal justice system related to fentanyl possession or distribution. It has pretty much doubled every year since 2020. In 2019, we see the numbers of people who are arrested and charged with fentanyl distribution are doubling every year. I hope you're right that it's leveling off. We haven't seen it in the criminal justice system. But yes, interestingly enough, fentanyl has now become the drug of choice for many drug addicts. So it used to be when the probation department would talk to people about what drugs they were using and so forth, you know, there was much more cocaine and meth. Meth has always been the biggest drug in Denver until the last couple of years when it was overtaken by fentanyl. So now people are seeking out fentanyl. So that is why there's so much of it, because it's the drug that people want to buy. I don't think that's so true among young people, but that's one reason why it's so available. So the reasons are, it is very cheap to make, and it's very cheap to sell, and it has a very intense high. It doesn't last very long. So people might take 10 pills, 20 pills a day when they're really in that addiction phase. So as a result, we are seeing much more of it in the community. And one of the things that I didn't realize until talking with some of our crime lab experts who do the testing, that often the pills, the little blue pills, you may hear them called blues, they are only fentanyl with filler. So they may be combined with Tylenol, it may be combined with some other kind of filler, but there's just a little bit of fentanyl in there enough to give the high. So one thing I would tell you is tell your children, those young people who are here, do not buy blues, the little blue pills. They are the ones that can have a lethal dose. I mean, other things can as well, but that's the most common thing that we see. And it's because they aren't regulated like a regular drug is regulated as to the amount of active drug they can put into a pill. Fentanyl is not regulated because it's illegal, so you don't really know exactly how much you're going to get in one of those little blue pills. And they're made to look like Oxycontin, so people think they're prescription pills. And some of the overdoses we have seen involve people believing that they were buying Oxycontin and trying it and not realizing that it had fentanyl in it. So I think what we do is try to analyze the cases that we get, and if we think these are people who are addicted, who are using for that reason, we try to focus on that treatment element, but we come down very hard on those who are distributing. We have gone to the grand jury for distribution of drugs and guns because they often go together. Many drug dealers will carry guns because there are drug deals that go bad and someone ends up getting ripped off, and then they use a weapon as a result. So it is dangerous, but we do know that kids experiment. So I think the more education we can give them about the dangers of these particularly the blues, is really helpful. But if I could change one thing about the criminal justice system, or actually, I guess, on a broader scale, I am very concerned about the violence among our youth, and the drug use. If we could get more at the root causes, that what causes young people to get involved in violence and get involved in drugs, that would be what I would like to address and change.
Great, thank you, everyone. And I'd like to open it up to the audience. Does anyone have any questions for the panelists?
Want to ask DA McCann about just how would you talk to students about the Good Samaritan law? Oh, and just your most persuasive argument, and just for those of us that work with youth, because I feel like it's just so important that they understand it and know they are protected, so they do stay and get help for their friends when they're in those situations.
Thank you for that question. I meant to talk about it. So the question has to do with the Good Samaritan law. So what that is that it gives immunity to someone who calls 911 if their friend or someone they know is overdosing. Well, it doesn't even have to be someone they know, but if someone is overdosing in their presence, it gives immunity for them calling 911 so that they won't be prosecuted for distribution. It's a little more complicated than that because right now there's an exception for fentanyl, but there's a bill in the legislature this year, which I testified in support of, that will extend that. It isn't quite the same as immunity, but it's a defense to the charge if you call 911 and you stay on scene and you assist in whatever way the firefighters or the paramedics ask, or the police, then you have a defense to any charge that might occur because of your presence and perhaps your participation in giving the drugs to the person. So the idea is we want to encourage people to call 911 if someone is overdosing in front of them. It is much more important that we save the life of the person than to worry about prosecution. My office, we're not going to be prosecuting those cases in Denver unless we have unless we really believe we have a serious dealer. But when friends get together and like one friend gives another friend pills thinking they are Oxycontin or cocaine or whatever, and it turns out to be a lethal dose of fentanyl, absolutely we want you calling 911. We don't want you being afraid that you're going to get prosecuted. So thank you very much for that question. It's very important.
My question actually is for Senator McCann. So I know you had mentioned like your kind of dream wish, are there any plans or even barriers that are in place to actually getting closer to discovering what that root is and addressing it in relation to the violence component and the drug component?
So the question has to do with, are we any closer to getting at some of those root causes and addressing them? So I would say yes and no, because I do think Denver has a number of very good outreach programs, like the programs we talked about a little bit, to work with the community. There is a violence prevention office for Denver, and there's now also one for the state, which is exploring how do we do a better job of intervening earlier on with kids. So I think there are good efforts going on. I think part of the no is that we don't really have great data on what's causing the violence. We do know that oftentimes kids are exposed to violence at a very young age, and that becomes their way of resolving conflict. They don't learn conflict resolution skills, and that's something that I think we should be doing more of. And me, I am a very pro-gun control person. I'm so tired of these kids shooting each other when they're like 14, 15, 16 years old. We have to do something about getting handguns out of the hands of kids. That is a very difficult problem to tackle. We have started a program in my office with the probation department and the public defenders for kids that are picked up with guns that haven't used them yet, to try to intervene at that stage. And it's also kind of a harm reduction program where they have to show up several Monday nights with their parents, and there are various aspects of violence prevention that are talked about. We are hopeful that that kind of an intervention when they're younger and haven't used the guns will be helpful. But I am not optimistic right now about what's going on with Denver. I think I'm giving you a soapbox. I think our media and our social media in particular, and our video games, and the way we glorify possession of guns, and use of guns is just really awful, and I think it's contributing to what's going on in our community. And I feel for these kids who have to go to school being afraid that somebody might get shot, not just in a mass shooting, that's one thing, but just in, like what happened at East High, which was really more of a targeted shooting. So we just have to keep working on it. We have to stay vigilant, and we can't give up. But I think I'm really glad that kids are mobilizing more. And, East High School, a social worker, psychologist was telling me that they are going down to the state legislature on Friday. And I think that kids have got to make their voices known. I mean, it's absolutely insane that kids cannot go to school without worrying about guns. I mean, it's not acceptable.
I wasn't asked about this, but I'm gonna answer too. I mentioned earlier kind of the behavioral health as a whole, and I really like to go back to the 4 pillars of recovery, because you don't have to use before entering what I think is recovery for folks. So home, health, purpose, and community. And I think one of the really big challenges is that we want to see quick fixes for things, particularly because we see so many tragedies all the time. And so we want these projects and programs to build quickly and see change very, very quickly, right? But these things take decades to adjust these systems, and multi-generational approaches to make sure that we're supporting families and people as they're coping. So I think that that's really the direction we should be going. I have seen a lot of that stuff kind of moving in that direction, but it's also in reminding folks that none of this is an overnight thing, right? And it's all about all of us working together and moving towards those same goals so that we can support our youth and the folks that want to be there and supporting them as well.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, sorry. What are you seeing here at DSISD as a whole? And how is it?
When you say as a whole, what do you mean as a whole? For just Narcan distribution?
Just the district. Specifically for Narcan.
So I know that for DPS specifically, it's become more of a prominent thing to get Narcan in all DPS schools. And we have been very adamant about that. Every nursing, I guess you would say, meet that we have, we always have Narcan get out to every school. Middle school and high school was the most prominent. And I think they're even considering just having Narcan in elementary schools. And it's also just good to have amongst schools in general, because, you know, we live near Colfax, or we are based in Colfax, which is metropolitan area. And Narcan is actually, we're able to give it to anyone who's on DPS grounds. Not only just our kids, but just like anyone who happens to be on DPS grounds. And you can tell by the signs, pinpoint eyes, overdosing at any point. That's just an opportunity to save someone's life. So DPS has been it's new to the DPS nursing, as in like being more proactive towards it for sure. But I know that we're working on having like a yearly based, I guess, delegation for all schools. I know that they're working on doing something like that for the summer, and getting that started for the upcoming next year to make sure that everyone within the staffing of all DPS schools know how to give Narcan and the signs and symptoms to look for, as well as just it being part of our curriculum, with even being CPR certified and first aid. Those are really important to have on top of giving Narcan. Because if you're gonna be giving a life-saving drug, you should know how to save a life and give rescue breaths on top of that. And another thing I wanna add is with Narcan, yes, they give you the steps, but when you're calling 911, when you're always calling 911 for the emergency medication, they can actually walk you through the steps. So that's also based with the Good Samaritan's Law, is that when you call 911, they can walk you through the steps so you're not scared and like, what do I do? Because it is a scary thing, and you're based fully on your adrenaline. You're like, okay, and sometimes people just kind of act. So they're definitely utilizing doing that more. Like I said before, I have a link that I can distribute to have on like our website for DSISD, that I think would be great, because I know parents probably access that as well, because it's good for you guys to know, like what to do, what to look out for. It's about 7 minutes long. I've been adamant about sending it when we first got all of our Narcan in the schools, and we're just trying to get more of a timeline of who is actually watching the video, so we're working on that as well. And it's, you know, it's a process, but I think the most important thing to know is how to give it, when to give it, the things to know, the signs and symptoms to be aware of, and just honestly, just know CPR, know your first aid. I feel like that's the best thing you could ever do to be a contributing person to society. Just know CPR and first aid. Like call 911 when in doubt. If someone looks in distress, just call 911. That's what we're all here for. The emergency staff, EMTs, nurses, we are here to save lives. So I hope that answered your question. Awesome.
I'm trying to think what it was I wanted to add. There were 2 things. Oh, first of all, Narcan, if someone is not overdosing from an opioid and you give them Narcan, it just will not bring them back. You're not going to hurt them. So again, we're not doctors. You see the PE teacher on the ground. I don't know what happened to the PE teacher. Maybe they had a heart attack. Maybe I don't know. But if I have naloxone or Narcan in my school and I have concern about that and I use the naloxone and save that person, that's a pretty darn good day, right? So again, the whole don't be scared of it. It's here to save lives. And one fantastic thing about Colorado is we have a bulk naloxone fund through the state. So most, I would say, of our school districts, large school districts, specifically in the metro area, have applied this to the CPKG bulk fund, where they get hundreds and hundreds of naloxone for free. It's a very simple process. You don't have to go through a specific training. If you do a training, there are specific things that are part of the standing order and the state statute that are required, but it really is just what you said. It's just how to recognize an overdose and how to respond and call 911 and good SAMs and things like that. But can you raise your hand if you have naloxone or Narcan? That's something you already have. Great, so is there any out in the hallway? Okay, so hopefully on your way out, please pick it up, and I'm not gonna speak for the students because I am not your parents, but please take it unless someone's telling you you shouldn't. And give it to somebody who may need it, or put it in your backpack, or put it in your parents' car, and share this information with someone tonight.
Thank you. Yes, and the Maddie Wright Foundation is outside of the table if you're interested in, yes. Sorry. No, you're okay.
I have literally used it on someone at a party, okay? Like someone passed out, no one knew the person, like she had come with someone, we didn't know. I did the sternum rub, she was responsive, but like still not really breathing fully. I gave her one dose, had someone else time, this was, EMS was already on the way. I ended up giving her the second dose, she was vomiting a bit, and nothing bad happened. At the end of the day, I don't think it was an opioid, but I wasn't gonna risk it. I think that one of the things that youth in particular really fear is not even the law enforcement piece, but really the parents, right? And so I think it's really important for parents to say, hey, you know, I don't necessarily want you to use, but maybe someone you're around might be using, and be that trusted adult so that people aren't worried that they're gonna get in trouble with their parent. This could be similar with like using alcohol as well. If there's a friend at a party and they're passed out on the couch, do not leave them there. Continue to check on them. Respiratory depression and brain failure can occur within 3 to 5 minutes without oxygen. So if anyone is ever not breathing for any reason, you can give them rescue breaths because what they need is oxygen. So I'd really encourage folks to do that and really think about having those conversations with your kids so that they trust you or know that there's someone that they can go to and they're not worried about, am I going to get in trouble with their parents? Because there's something in the brain that just makes you think that that's the worst possible thing that could happen in that moment, and it's really that your friend could die. Not to be, again, you know, the fear factor thing, but that really can happen. And it can go from just slow breathing to a fatal overdose very quickly. So making sure that there are those trusted folks. And then you talk to your kids about making sure that they can trust you and come to you in those difficult situations.
Please go ahead. Never get that go. And the myth that we're talking about with naloxone, the only thing that you would have to ever worry about if someone was allergic to it, but that's not very common. That's the only like downside to naloxone or Narcan, is someone who is actually allergic to it. But even when in doubt, it's pretty much, you're gonna save their life and that's all that matters. And I keep Narcan on me 24/7. And not only because I'm a nurse, but just because like we're in Colorado. I mean, there's a lot of concerts, a lot of people, like you just never know who's around, like your friends. Like I would like to save my friend if something were to happen. So yeah, please take a Narcan on your way out, regardless, just to be safe for anyone out here, because you could save someone's life. That's a parent, a child, you know, your sister, your brother, your best friend. I mean, that's worth it to me. If we don't have any other questions from the audience, I'd like to just be respectful of everyone's time.
Just two questions really fast. When you speak about the Good Samaritan law, I hear that you say Denver. That only applies to the city and county of Denver, or all the metro area, or all the states, or all the nations? That is my first question. My second question is like, I am a mother too, and I have young adults. And I am like, I also work in a high school. I want the kids to be informed. I want to know what they should do. But this is where my motherly heart comes into the picture, and it's like, where or how can we be more intentional? Like, I want you to be informed because you are a young adult, because you might be exposed to these situations, but I do not want you to be desensitized about this. Yeah. I think that is the most difficult part for me. And if you can give me any tips, I am open, because for me, that is the most difficult part.
Well, I'll take the first one and then I'll let the others take the other one. The Good Samaritan law is statewide. However, right now, there is that exception for fentanyl. So there is a state law that's being considered, hopefully will pass, that will extend the Good Samaritan to fentanyl, the Good Samaritan law to fentanyl. I think it will pass. That said, that particular new law is a little bit different than the immunity that's provided for other kinds of drugs. It provides a defense. This is getting kind of technical, but I guess the bottom line is every DAs in different parts of the state will make their own decisions about how they're going to handle cases. I'm telling you that in Denver, we would not be prosecuting someone who calls in because someone is overdosing, unless we believe they really are a dealer. So the bottom line is we want everyone to report or call 911 if there is an overdose and not to worry about being prosecuted. Okay, does that help? Who wants to answer the rest of the question?
That was a hard one, you know, and I was trying to think about it too. I'm like, how do we, but I mean, I think we're all trying to figure that out, right? I think that one of the ways that you can frame it is that, you know, fentanyl is, I mean, it's the thing right now, right? And we continue, we are gonna see different things, right? So this is the continuing to educate, right? And so, yes, fentanyl's in a lot of stuff right now, but there are also these other drugs coming through. There are different types of benzodiazepines and things where we won't have a resource like naloxone to reverse those overdoses. And so I think that maybe by adding that additional kind of historical information and how it's constantly changing, just like any drugs, any supply of anything, right? So I think about during COVID, right? And we were all buying all of our stuff online, and then like a big ship got stuck and none of us got anything for forever, right? And it messed up everybody's shipments, right? That happened with the drug supply too. So everyone's getting really weird stuff all over the place, and it's gonna change every single time. And so I think that just providing that continued education, and that it's not just this one drug, this one time, but that we're gonna continue to see this shift. And so making sure that people are aware of all overdose prevention strategies and support systems, regardless of the type of drug, is probably how I would address that. Not a perfect answer though. If you figure it out, let us know.
Because it's not going away. So I think that might be where it's not heightened. And, you know, like,
I know I'm being philosophical about that too, like, it's not a trend. So it's not like, hey, we're gonna be talking about in the schools this week, and then all of a sudden in 6 months, fentanyl's gone and no one's dying of overdose. So I think all we're doing is like really making sure that there's factual education in the schools and in our community, and that it's consistent, right? That the messaging is consistent, and then I think that helps people to go, well, this isn't baloney, and this isn't just hype. And then I don't think this is where you're going, but I also think about it with like stigma and mental health, which I think Colorado's doing a better job of, that parents and we all understand that it's okay to talk to a young person about how they're feeling and about their mental health and suicide ideation or whatever that is. And it's the same thing with substance use, is by us talking about it and providing naloxone does not make people go and use substances. And so these are just educational things that it takes all of us to just learn a little bit and just have it kind of be the norm of our community. And so it doesn't look like one mom out there hyping it up.
Thank you all for being here tonight. It's just so wonderful you're here. I wanted to mention, I do have QR codes spread out here and also on the table outside that have lots of different resources that Ms. Nichols and Leah Rafa created that slide deck that is fantastic. So please use your phone to scan that QR code, and it has lots of wonderful resources in it. Please take some food with you on your way out. And if you didn't sign in on your way in, sign in on your way out for me, please. But thank you so much for your time this evening. If anything else, please, anything comes up, any questions, you can contact me, Ms. Maria Height. I have a QR code on the table as well, and you can send me an email via that way. But thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your night and a safe drive home.